There comes a point in every person's life when the truth becomes too heavy to ignore. Eventually, the walls built from pride, fear, logic, or emotional distance begin to crack, and the heart can no longer pretend it feels nothing. This morning, in a quiet moment that no one else witnessed, someone finally stopped resisting what they truly feel about you. Not because you pressured them, not because you demanded their attention. It happened because the unconscious mind always brings hidden emotions into the light, no matter how hard the conscious mind tries to bury them. Carl Jung believed the human mind was never meant to conceal the truth forever. People push painful emotions into the shadows, disguise longing as indifference, and convince themselves they have moved on when deep inside they remain emotionally connected. But the shadow never stays silent forever. It finds ways to speak through dreams, unexpected memories, restless mornings, and feelings that refuse to disappear. And today, they woke up realizing that your presence has quietly become part of their inner world. There is something important to understand. People do not repeatedly think about someone who means nothing to them. The mind doesn't keep returning to empty places without reason. If your presence continues appearing in someone's thoughts, it is because you awaken something inside them that cannot be explained with simple logic. Jung believed that certain people enter our lives for a reason. They act like mirrors, reflecting hidden emotions, buried wounds, forgotten dreams, and parts of ourselves we have ignored for years. You became that mirror for them. For a long time, they fought against what your presence stirred within them. The ego always resists change. Pride tells us to stay in control. Fear tells us to avoid vulnerability. But genuine love doesn't answer to the ego. Real emotional connection moves beyond the masks people wear. It reaches into the unconscious where the deepest truths quietly exist. That is why distractions never truly erased you from their mind. Busy schedules couldn't silence your memory. Distance couldn't weaken what was growing beneath the surface. Then, sometime this morning, perhaps before the world fully came alive, they finally admitted something they had been trying to escape. They missed you. They felt the emptiness your absence created. They realized that thoughts of you had been living inside their mind far longer than they wanted to admit. What truly scared them was never love itself. It was the change that love demanded from them. Authentic, emotional connection breaks down illusions. It forces people to face themselves honestly. That is why Jung placed so much importance on the journey of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming a complete and authentic person. Sometimes another individual becomes the catalyst for that transformation. Your presence may have brought hidden loneliness to the surface. It may have exposed emotional wounds they had spent years avoiding. It may have forced them to confront parts of themselves they were never ready to acknowledge. Ironically, people often run from the very person who awakens them the most because awakening requires change, and change can feel frightening. But today, something shifted inside them. For the first time, they stopped debating with their own heart. They accepted that what they feel for you goes beyond simple attraction, temporary excitement, or passing curiosity. Something within them recognizes you on a level that feels both psychological and deeply spiritual, even if they cannot fully explain why. That realization quietly changes everything, even before a single word is spoken. At the same time, never forget where your real strength comes from. It has never depended on convincing someone to choose you. Your greatest power has always been your authenticity. Jung warned against sacrificing your identity simply to gain another person's approval. The strongest energy is never desperation. It is wholeness. When you remain committed to your own growth, your purpose, and your inner peace, you naturally become more magnetic. You no longer chase validation because your value no longer depends on someone else's response. Healthy love cannot grow where self-abandonment exists, so don't beg for reassurance, don't force confessions or demand proof of their feelings. Real truth unfolds naturally when the unconscious becomes impossible to ignore, and today, somewhere within them, another emotional barrier finally gave way. The feelings they tried so hard to suppress could no longer be denied. The unconscious mind is far more powerful than most people realize. Jung believed it shapes much more of our lives than the conscious thoughts we proudly display every day. Someone may confidently insist they have moved on. They may appear distant, emotionally unavailable, or completely unaffected, yet beneath that outward image, an entirely different reality may be unfolding. Human beings are remarkably skilled at hiding emotions that make them feel exposed. Pride encourages emotional suppression. Fear convinces people that denial is safer than honesty. But the unconscious follows neither pride nor fear. It patiently waits until the truth can no longer remain hidden. That is why authentic emotions always return. The conscious mind may become distracted by work, responsibilities, conversations, or endless activity, but the soul continues remembering. Then, in a quiet morning, a sleepless night, or a peaceful moment with no distractions, everything resurfaces. A familiar memory appears without warning. A voice echoes through the mind. A feeling rises that cannot be explained away with logic. That is the unconscious revealing what has been true all along. Jung believed that suppressed emotions never disappear. They simply retreat into the shadows where they continue growing stronger. The longer someone refuses to face what they truly feel, the more powerful those emotions become beneath the surface, until one day denial finally loses its battle against the truth. This is why some people suddenly become emotionally unsettled without knowing the real reason. They try to move on with life, yet their mind keeps drifting back to the same person. They convince themselves they have let go, but something unseen continues pulling them in the opposite direction. The reason is simple. The unconscious mind often recognizes what truly matters long before the conscious mind is willing to accept it. People do not continuously think about someone who has no emotional importance. Every meaningful connection leaves a lasting psychological imprint. When someone genuinely touches another person's inner world, their presence remains long after the conversations end or the distance begins. Even their absence carries emotional weight. While the ego may insist the connection no longer matters, the unconscious quietly continues processing it beneath the surface. Eventually, pretending becomes exhausting. The heart grows tired of arguing against what it already knows to be true. Then comes a deeply personal moment of surrender. There are no dramatic speeches or public confessions. Instead, a quiet realization settles within them. The emotions they worked so hard to suppress were never signs of weakness. They were simply truths waiting to be acknowledged. Many people imagine that real love feels peaceful from the very beginning. Carl Jung saw it differently. Genuine emotional connection often arrives alongside inner conflict because real connection demands transformation. The mind naturally resists anything that threatens the identity it has carefully built over the years. When someone enters your life and reaches the deepest parts of your soul, everything inside begins to shift. Emotions become stronger. Thoughts become impossible to ignore. Feelings that were buried for years slowly rise into awareness. Hidden parts of the personality begin asking to be seen. That is why people often resist the very connection they secretly long for. The ego values control above everything else. It wants certainty, emotional security, and protection from vulnerability. But authentic love challenges every one of those illusions. The moment another person truly begins to matter, fear often appears alongside affection. There is fear of rejection, fear of depending on someone, fear of losing independence, fear of exposing hidden emotions, and perhaps most of all, fear of becoming a different person because of the relationship. For many people, running away feels safer than facing those emotions. So they create distance, not because their feelings are absent, but because those feelings become overwhelming. Sometimes, the strongest withdrawal is actually evidence of the deepest emotional impact. When an emotional experience feels incomplete, it continues returning in subtle ways. This is why people often replay old conversations, remember small details years later, or imagine how a different choice might have changed everything. Waiting is closely connected to this psychological need for completion. Someone who has formed a meaningful emotional bond may find it difficult to simply erase that connection because the mind does not treat important relationships like ordinary memories. Instead, they become part of a person's inner emotional landscape. Even while focusing on work, family, or personal goals, there may be quiet moments when thoughts return to the person they cannot completely let go of. This does not mean they are unable to move forward in life. It means the emotional story still feels unfinished, and the mind continues searching for understanding. Many people misunderstand waiting because they associate it with weakness or dependence. In reality, waiting often reflects an internal conflict rather than a lack of strength. A person may deeply care about someone while also respecting their space. They may wish to reconnect but hesitate because they fear causing pressure, being misunderstood, or reopening old wounds. Instead of acting impulsively, they remain silent, hoping that the right moment will eventually arrive. From the outside, this silence may appear like indifference, but internally, it is often filled with constant reflection. Every passing day brings questions about whether reaching out would help or only create more confusion. The longer this uncertainty continues, the more emotionally significant the waiting can become. Time has a unique effect on emotions. Feelings based only on excitement often fade as new experiences replace old ones. Genuine emotional attachment behaves differently. Instead of disappearing quickly, it changes shape. The intense excitement may become quiet longing. Constant thoughts may become occasional but deeply meaningful memories. The need for immediate answers may transform into a quiet hope that someday the story will make sense. This transformation shows emotional maturity rather than emotional absence. A person who continues caring despite the passing of time is often responding to something much deeper than surface attraction. They are responding to the lasting impression another person has left within their emotional world. Waiting also creates opportunities for self-discovery. As someone lives with uncertainty, they begin confronting their own fears, expectations, and emotional patterns. They may realize that what they truly value is not perfection or constant reassurance, but authenticity, trust, and emotional safety. In this way, waiting becomes more than simply hoping for another person. It becomes a mirror that reflects hidden parts of the self. It reveals how deeply someone can care, how patiently they can endure uncertainty, and how profoundly meaningful connections continue shaping the heart long after words have faded into silence. Many people spend their lives searching for signs outside themselves, believing that every answer must come from another person's actions, words, or decisions. They constantly watch for messages, changes in behavior, or visible proof that someone still cares. Yet, the most important signals often emerge long before anything changes externally. They begin within the quiet movements of your own inner world. The human mind is constantly processing experiences beneath conscious awareness. Even when you believe you have stopped thinking about someone, the deeper layers of your psyche continue organizing memories, emotions, and unresolved questions. What suddenly appears as an unexpected feeling or recurring thought is often the result of this ongoing inner process finally reaching the surface. One of the most common experiences is the return of vivid memories without any obvious trigger. You may be focused on an ordinary task when a conversation from months or even years ago suddenly feels alive again. A small detail you had forgotten becomes remarkably clear, or you remember the expression on someone's face with surprising accuracy. This does not necessarily mean that something mystical is happening. Instead, it reflects the way the unconscious mind stores emotionally significant experiences. Unlike ordinary memories that gradually fade, emotionally charged moments remain connected to feelings that can be reactivated whenever your inner world encounters something similar. The mind quietly brings these experiences back into awareness because they still contain meaning that has not been fully understood or integrated. Dreams can also become powerful reflections of the inner psychological world. During sleep, the conscious mind relaxes its constant need to control thoughts, allowing deeper emotional material to emerge through symbolic images and narratives. A person from your past may appear in a dream, not because your mind is predicting the future, but because that individual represents emotions, lessons, hopes, or unresolved conflicts that continue living within you. Sometimes the dream focuses less on the person themselves and more on what they symbolize. They may represent trust, loss, longing, courage, or the part of yourself that you have neglected. Paying attention to these dreams can reveal emotional truths that remain hidden during waking life, offering insight into your own psychological growth rather than simply focusing on another person's intentions. You may also notice emotional shifts that seem difficult to explain. There are days when a wave of sadness, peace, hope, or nostalgia appears without any clear external cause. Rather than dismissing these moments, it can be valuable to observe them with curiosity. Emotions often serve as messengers pointing toward parts of your inner experience that deserve attention. A sudden feeling of longing may reveal an unmet emotional need. An unexpected sense of calm may indicate that you are slowly accepting something you once resisted. These emotional movements are rarely random. They reflect the mind's ongoing effort to bring hidden experiences into conscious awareness so they can be understood instead of ignored. As this inner awareness grows, you begin noticing subtle patterns that were always present but previously overlooked. Certain situations repeatedly evoke the same emotional response. Specific types of people awaken familiar hopes or fears. Old beliefs about love, rejection, trust, or self-worth quietly shape the way you interpret every new experience. Recognizing these patterns is one of the most valuable forms of psychological insight because it shifts your attention away from trying to control others and toward understanding yourself. Instead of endlessly searching for confirmation in someone else's behavior, you become more attentive to the messages arising from your own mind. In that quiet observation, clarity begins to replace confusion, allowing your decisions to be guided not by fear or wishful thinking, but by a deeper understanding of your own emotional landscape. Fear has a remarkable ability to disguise itself. Most people imagine fear as something obvious, appearing in moments of danger or uncertainty. Yet some of the deepest fears are hidden behind ordinary behavior. A person may seem calm, distant, independent, or even indifferent while carrying an intense emotional conflict within. This becomes especially true when genuine feelings begin to develop. Emotional closeness asks people to reveal parts of themselves they usually protect. It requires honesty, vulnerability, and the willingness to be seen without masks. For many, this is far more frightening than remaining silent. As a result, the very emotions that could create a meaningful connection become the reason someone hesitates, withdraws, or sends confusing signals. What appears to be a lack of interest is sometimes an attempt to avoid the discomfort that accompanies emotional exposure. The human mind is naturally designed to protect itself from pain. Every past disappointment, broken promise, rejection, or emotional wound leaves an impression on the unconscious. These experiences quietly shape future expectations, often without a person realizing it. Someone who has been hurt before may unconsciously expect history to repeat itself. Even when they meet someone who feels different, the mind remains cautious. Instead of seeing only the present, it compares new experiences with old memories. A delayed reply may remind them of previous abandonment. A misunderstanding may awaken fears of rejection. Small situations become emotionally significant because the unconscious connects them to earlier pain. The person may sincerely want closeness, yet another part of them insists on staying emotionally protected. Pride often becomes another layer hiding fear. Many people believe that appearing strong means never admitting how deeply they care. They convince themselves that expressing emotions first will make them look weak or give someone else too much power. This belief creates an invisible barrier between two people who may both be waiting for the other to make the first move. Each hopes for reassurance while avoiding the vulnerability required to create it. Silence then becomes a form of self-protection. Instead of risking rejection, they choose uncertainty. Instead of asking honest questions, they imagine possible answers. The longer this pattern continues, the more difficult it becomes to break because every passing day adds new doubts to the original fear. Self-doubt also plays a powerful role in delaying genuine connection. A person may wonder whether they are truly worthy of being loved, respected, or chosen. They compare themselves to others, focus on their flaws, or believe they are somehow not enough. These quiet beliefs influence every interaction. Even when another person shows interest, they may struggle to believe it is genuine. Compliments are questioned, kindness is analyzed, and affection is met with suspicion rather than acceptance. The greatest obstacle is often not the relationship itself, but the internal story the person tells about their own value. Until that story begins to change, every opportunity for closeness feels uncertain, regardless of how sincere the other person's feelings may be. Fear rarely announces itself directly. Instead, it hides behind hesitation, mixed signals, overthinking, emotional distance, or endless waiting for the perfect moment. Yet beneath these protective behaviors often lies a genuine desire for connection, understanding, and acceptance. The challenge is recognizing that emotional courage does not mean eliminating fear, but choosing honesty despite it. Meaningful relationships are not built by people who never feel afraid. They are built by individuals who gradually learn that trust grows through openness, that vulnerability creates understanding rather than weakness, and that lasting connection becomes possible only when fear is no longer allowed to make every important decision. Awareness is one of the most powerful transformations a person can experience because it changes the way every emotion, relationship, and life event is understood. Most people move through life reacting automatically to what happens around them. They become controlled by disappointment, excitement, fear, or hope without stopping to ask why those emotions are so intense. They believe the answers always exist outside themselves in another person's actions, words, or choices. Yet, genuine change begins the moment attention turns inward. Awareness is the quiet ability to observe your own thoughts, emotions, and reactions without immediately judging or acting on them. It creates a small but meaningful distance between what you feel and how you choose to respond. Within that space, wisdom begins to replace impulse, and understanding begins to replace confusion. The human mind is filled with patterns that develop over many years. Every childhood experience, meaningful relationship, success, disappointment, and emotional wound contributes to the beliefs people carry into adulthood. These beliefs often operate beneath conscious awareness, shaping reactions before logic has a chance to intervene. Someone who fears rejection may interpret silence as abandonment. Someone who has struggled to trust may question genuine kindness. Another person who experienced emotional neglect may constantly seek reassurance without fully understanding why. These patterns become so familiar that they feel like reality itself. Awareness gently reveals that what feels true is not always objectively true. Sometimes the strongest emotional reactions come not from the present situation, but from older experiences that remain unresolved within the unconscious. As awareness grows, people begin recognizing the difference between facts and interpretations. A delayed message is simply a delayed message. Yet the mind may immediately create stories about being forgotten, ignored, or replaced. A brief disagreement may become evidence that a relationship is ending, even when no such conclusion exists. The unconscious naturally fills gaps with assumptions based on past experiences. Without awareness, these assumptions quickly become beliefs that influence decisions and behaviors. With awareness, however, a person learns to pause before accepting every thought as reality. They begin asking deeper questions. Is this fear based on the present moment, or is it echoing an older emotional experience? Am I responding to what is actually happening or to what I imagine might happen? These simple reflections create profound psychological freedom because they weaken the automatic influence of unconscious patterns. Awareness also transforms the way people understand others. Instead of immediately judging someone's silence, hesitation, or emotional distance, they become curious about the hidden struggles that may exist beneath the surface. They realize that every person carries invisible fears, private disappointments, and unresolved emotional conflicts. This perspective does not excuse harmful behavior, but it replaces quick judgment with thoughtful understanding. Compassion naturally grows because awareness reveals that human behavior is often driven by internal battles that remain unseen. The more deeply people understand themselves, the easier it becomes to recognize the complexity within everyone they meet. Perhaps the greatest gift of awareness is that it shifts life from unconscious repetition to intentional choice. Instead of endlessly repeating the same emotional cycles, a person begins recognizing them while they are happening. They notice when fear tries to speak louder than trust, when pride hides genuine affection, or when old insecurities attempt to define present relationships. This recognition does not make difficult emotions disappear overnight, but it changes the relationship with them. Fear no longer becomes the unquestioned leader of every decision. Doubt no longer automatically determines every action. Awareness allows people to respond with patience instead of panic, clarity instead of confusion, and courage instead of avoidance. Through this quiet transformation, relationships become healthier, emotions become more balanced, and the inner world gradually reflects greater wisdom, stability, and authentic understanding. As you reflect on everything we've explored today, remember that the greatest signs are not always the loudest ones. They often appear in quiet moments, in the emotions you cannot easily explain, in the memories that continue to return, and in the awareness that slowly grows within you. If someone is truly waiting for you, time will reveal the truth. But your first responsibility is not to chase another person. It is to understand yourself. When you become aware of your own fears, patterns, and emotional habits, you stop reacting from uncertainty and begin making choices from clarity and confidence. Real connection is never built on desperation, assumptions, or endless guessing. It grows through honesty, emotional maturity, patience, and the courage to face both yourself and another person without hiding behind fear. Sometimes the sign you have been searching for is not outside of you at all. It is the quiet realization that you are becoming someone who is ready to give and receive genuine connection without losing yourself in the process. If this message resonated with you, take a moment today to reflect instead of rushing to conclusions. Listen to your inner voice. Observe your emotions with compassion and allow wisdom, not fear, to guide your next step. The more you understand your own inner world, the more clearly you will recognize the people and opportunities that truly belong in your life. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I truly appreciate your presence and your willingness to explore these deeper ideas. If you found value in today's message, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need to hear these words today. I wish you peace, clarity, emotional strength, and the courage to embrace every meaningful chapter that lies ahead. Good luck on your journey, take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.